In this video we're going to take a look at the newly released machine from Tier 1 of the HackTheBox starting point track. It's called Funnel, and as you can see here I'm already connected to the starting point VPN, and I have booted the machine, got the IP address here. I added that to the etc hosts file, and that means we can just access this through the domain name rather than having to memorize that IP address. I also ran a port scan because it takes a couple of minutes, so it asks us first of all how many TCP ports are open. And if we go and have a look at NMap, which I just ran with the service enumeration, default scripts, and all ports, and it came back with 2 open ports. So we have 21, which is FTP. We can see the version here, so it's VS-FTPD 3.0.3. It's identified the anonymous FTP login as allowed, so it actually tried to log in as the anonymous user and enumerate the FTP server. So it's found this directory called mail backup. Also got a bit more information here, and then we can also see that we have the SSH port open on 22. So that took me 88 seconds to run that. You could have just run without the -p and that would do the top 1,000 ports. It would have still picked both of these up, and it would have taken a lot less time without doing all 65,000. So let's return to the questions and see what it asks. It asks first of all how many TCP ports are open. We just found out that there are 2. So we'll submit that, and it also asks what was the name of the directory, and we got that from NMap as well, so we can just enter that. It's also asking us something here about a default password, which I didn't see anything in the NMap scan, so let's go and try and connect to the FTP server. We know it's got anonymous login, so we'll just do FTP and funnel.hackthebox, put in here anonymous and just blank password. And then we can have a look and see what we've got. We've got this directory mail backup. If we don't know what commands to use here, we can use a question mark or type help. And we've got the list of possible commands. In this case, we want to go into that mail backup. So we'll do cd mail backup and then see what we've got. And we have a PDF password policy and then this welcome to a, so we've got welcome and then the date. We could use get to download each of these individually, or we can use mget to download multiple. We could also try and put a file here as well, so you could try to put, like, let's do web shells shell.php and see whether we're able to upload a file. If we were, and this directory was accessible through the web browser, we could potentially get a reverse shell on the system. In this case we get permission denied, so let's do mget and then we'll just say yes to both of these. We can use file to see what type of files we've got. We've got one, it's just text, and then we've got the PDF document as well. So let's cat out that welcome, and it's an email, so it says from root@funnel.hackthebox to, and then we've got now a few usernames or a few email addresses. So we know what format this is in. We also know what format the usernames are in. So quite often organizations might use like the first initial and then the surname, or first initial dot surname. In this case it looks like they're just using the first name with no surname, no initials. So that's worth bearing in mind. We can basically take these and make a user list. And because we know what the format is as well, we could also try and guess other users that weren't included in the email. In this case what I'll do is I'll use Control and H in Sublime to open up this find and replace. Let's replace the space with \n, making sure that you have this regex option on down in the bottom left. Replace all, and then we can also, I'll also get rid of the, I'll also get rid of this email address as well, as we probably don't need to supply that. And there we go. We could also add the root user, which was the user that sent the email. And let's go back to the message. So, welcome to the team. We think you'd be a great asset to the funnel team. We have set up your accounts that will need access on our internal infrastructure. Please read through the attached password policy with extreme care. All steps mentioned, etc. Okay, not too much there. Let's go and have a look at the document. Oh, we could also as well maybe use something like the exif tool on the PDF document and potentially get another user. So you have here creator, producer. There might be another username in here somewhere. In this case there isn't. So let's just open it up and take a look. So we've got a short overview here just telling us what a password policy is, and then some information about the password creation. So it's just telling us this should be complex. You shouldn't use easy to crack passwords like password and any variation of it. The password should be unique, meaning only the user who chooses it knows what it is. You may need to change them at certain frequencies. Here's the important bit. Default passwords, such as those created for new users, must be changed as quickly as possible. For example, the default password of funnel123 hash ! Must be changed immediately. So we've just been told what the default password is for all users. So it's possible that one of the users hasn't had chance to reset this password yet. It's also possible that a user might have used this password for a month or 6 weeks or however long they're allowed to use the same password for, and then when they're forced to change a password, they're just so used to typing this password in that they give something very similar. So maybe they'll give funnel1234, maybe they'll swap out one of these hashes for a question mark or something like that. So you could make a mutated password list which basically swaps around the numbers in this, swaps around the special characters, adds a special character, changes the capitalization of the funnel, things like that. In this case, let's just go in. I'm going to put this in a file called pass.txt, and I'm just doing that just in case I need to go and copy and paste it again. And then we can try this against our users. So there's a few different tools we could use. We could use something like Hydra, which you can use on a variety of protocols. You can, I don't know how to bring up the full list, but it works on a lot. You can also use like TLDR to get some examples, some quick examples, like how do we specify a username or how do we specify a username list, etc. I'm going to use crackmap exec instead. So you can do crackmap exec, or you can do CME. They both should do the same thing. And we can bring up the help menu. This will tell us what protocols are available. We know that we've got FTP, so that's worth looking at. We've also got SSH as well. Let's start off with FTP. So let's do CME FTP-H. And this will give us more specific options then for the module. We can see now how we can specify a username or a username file, how we can specify a password file, etc. So we'll do that again. This time we will specify, as it tells us to up here, we need to specify the target, and that can be an IP address or a host name. So we can use funnel. Oh, I've got no autocomplete. And then we'll use the users.txt and then pass. We could pass in that pass.txt, or you can type it in. If you do type it in, just bear in mind that some of these characters might be used by bash, so you might need to just put them inside single quotes. And if we run through that, it gets the banner VSFTPD 3.03, but it comes back saying login incorrect or no response for each of the usernames. So before we start mutating this password or before we start looking for other potential usernames, let's run this again, bearing in mind that we had the option to do this with SSH. So maybe this password has been used on multiple services. Run through that. It takes a little bit more time depending on what protocol you are brute forcing. Will depend how quickly this runs. So if you're ever working on a machine and the machine has FTP and SSH and you're trying to crack passwords, you're far better off cracking the passwords with FTP, which is going to run a lot quicker, or SMB. That'll run very fast, and then once you've identified the passwords, the chances are, or there's a good chance, that you'll be able to reuse those passwords on SSH without going through that really slow and noisy process of trying to brute force SSH. Anyway, that came back, and we got a successful login attempt for Christine, so we can now say SSH Christine at funnel.HackTheBox. Make sure this password is correct. And there we go, we're logged in. So let's see what we've missed here. I think I've probably skipped out on a lot of questions. Let's go and put in this password. It asks us what user has not changed the default password, and that was Christine. So we'll submit. And then it asks us what service is running on TCP port 5432. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. I normally just do netstats and then scroll through this stuff up to our ports, and then we have our 5432 that we can see is running on the local host. Notice that didn't come up whenever we ran Nmap, so that's worth bearing in mind. And we could also use SS, which is socket statistics, so we can do, that's actually a better option because you don't have to scroll through all of this stuff to get to the ports. And again, we can see localhost 5432, but what's actually running there? What I did here and what I would normally do is just go and search here, Hacktrix. Just going to put in that port number, and hopefully, okay, let me change that, Hacktrix, and let's actually say port 5432. Okay, alright, you can see down here, but look how many results there we have without the answer. Now let me change from DuckDuckGo to Google, Hacktrix, and there's the first result. Yeah, I don't like using Google, but unfortunately it just seems to be a lot more effective most of the time. And apparently I have to restart my Firefox now. Okay, so let's open up Hacktrix. What happened to my Firefox there? Did Hacktrix crash it, or did it just randomly crash? I guess we'll never know. So this takes us, we know we're using Postgresql, so what? I don't know why that came up. Okay, so advertisements. Okay, so Postgresql. Am I going to have to log back in here, potentially? Okay, I just logged back in. This sort of stuff always happens when you're trying to do a demo, as is the way. Okay, so next it says, since you can't access a previously mentioned service from the local machine, you'll have to create a tunnel and connect to it from your machine. What is the correct type of tunneling to use? Remote port forwarding or local port forwarding? So the answer here, we could actually guess the answer by looking at the length of the strings that it wants from us. The answer is local, but essentially the difference between local and remote, we can use local port forwarding to forward traffic from a local port on our device to the remote server. So we know that we want to access port 5432, so if we set up a local port forward, let's say to 1234, from 1234 locally to 5432 on the remote server, that basically means that whenever we send any data to port 1234 on our system, it's actually going to go to that 5432 port on the remote system. And the reverse port forwarding would be the opposite of that, the remote port forwarding. So let's say we have a web server on our local system and we want to be able to access some of the data on that web server. Maybe it's got some tools that we want to copy over to the victim's system, and we're not able to access it on the remote system. Maybe there's been some firewall rules set up to prevent that from happening. So what we would do is use a remote port forward so that we can actually access it on the remote. We can access our local system from the remote system. So let me take a copy of this. I'll explain this a little bit better in a second. So let me show a couple of ways of doing this. Let's exit out of this SSH, and we're going to do SSH again. We still want that username and we'll need to put in the password, but to set up our local port forwarding, then we can use -L. We can say what local port we want this to be on. I'm going to say 1234 here, and then we can say our local host, or you don't even need the 127, you can actually say local host, and then the port that we want to forward, 5432, which is a PostgreSQL. So if we do that, it's going to ask us for the password. We can grab the password from here, paste it in, and there we go. Now this looks the same, it doesn't look like anything's changed, but if we go back now and try and run an NMap scan, we'll do service enumeration, default scripts, and instead of the remote system, we're going to do this against our local system on port 1234. So everything we send to this port is actually going to port 5432 on the remote system. So this will hopefully come back and tell us that we have this PostgreSQL database. We can see the version, some fingerprinting information, and that's good, which means we can now access this PostgreSQL service on our local system. Now let me exit this. I'm going to close that down. Let's run that again. There we go, that's now closed, so we now can't access that port. And the reason I want to do that is just to show another method that we can use with SSH. So if you imagine that this remote system, it's only got 3 ports that we're interested in, SSH, FTP and Postgresql, and the only one that we can't access locally is Postgresql. So that's no hassle, we can just set up that local port forward. But let's say there were 20 or 30 ports on the remote system that we wanted to be able to access locally. We would have to set up a lot of those rules in order to access each of the ports, and we'd have to remember where they all are and stuff like that. So another thing we can do is dynamic port forwarding. We can say to SSH, we want dynamic port forwarding, and I'm going to say here on port 9050, and then again we just take in the SSH, we want the username and the host. We can paste that in, take a copy of the password, and this is basically going to forward all of the ports. So all of the ports will be accessible, however it also needs a SOCKS proxy. So at the moment I set that up on port 9050, which means we can use a tool like proxy chains, which I'm going to open up, etc proxychains.conf, and you need to have this set to the right proxy. So you can have HTTP, SOCKS4, SOCKS5, there are different proxy types. This is set to the local host on port 9050, which is, it needs to be set up with that dynamic port forwarding. And it means that anytime I actually want to access any of those ports on the remote system, I also need to do it through proxy chains. So just to give an example of that, let me go back and where is the, okay, let's do again, nmap-sv-sc port, and this time it'll be 5432 because we've not actually changed the port that's being forwarded, but it will still be on the local host. We try and run it, and you'll see that, oh okay, I was confused there. I guess I actually have PostgreSQL running. Let me do sudo service PostgreSQL stop. I was wondering how that was working without proxy chains. There we go. Alright, so it's now closed. I only realized that because it has the parrot as the DNS, which is obviously my system. You need PostgreSQL for using like Metasploit, so you'll generally have it running. Anyway, so that's now closed as it should be. So what we need to do in order to access that is to run it through proxy chains. I'm using proxy chains 4. We run through that. Notice how much information you get here, which I don't particularly like. What I normally do instead, let that run. There we go. So it's showing that we're now able to access it through proxy chains. What I normally do is use proxy chains -q for it to be quiet. Most tools like this, if you pass -q, you'll get like a quiet output that includes other tools like GoBuster and things like that. So if you want to get rid of all the banners and kind of extra noise, you can do that. Also, rather than putting proxy chains 4-q before every single command you run, what you might want to do is do proxy chains 4-q bash. And now we basically have a new bash instance which is running through proxy chains. So we can, everything we run now is going to be run through proxy chains automatically in quiet mode, and we don't need to remember to keep putting that at the beginning. You can set up an alias for this. So what I normally do is use pchains, which is just a bash alias which is set up to run that command. Shout out to Mantis who recommended that. And if you're working on a system and you know you're going to be doing a lot of tunneling, that's probably going to be a good way to do it. So apart from SSH, there are a lot of other options that you can use. Linux, you can actually set up port forwarding on Linux. You can use sshuttle. You can use Chisel, you can use Meterpreter. In Meterpreter you have a port forward option, you have a SOCKS proxy option as well. I recently did the HackTheBox CPTS, Certified Penetration Tester Specialist certification, and I made use of all of those, basically every pivoting and tunneling tool out there. You can also use plink on Windows and netsh. It's not too big of a deal here because, you know, if you need to set up a port forward like that, you can just do that dynamic SSH, or you can use sshuttle or something, which is quite similar. But if you have multiple systems, say you have a system A, and then once you get to system A, you have a system B, but system B can only talk to system A, That means you need multiple levels of pivoting, and once you start getting deep with that, you have 3 or 4 networks, and each network only talks to the network that came before it. You have a lot of different, a lot of configuring to do anyway. And it can also slow things down a lot. Depending on the tools you use, it can limit the functionality. So in certain cases you won't be able to use like NMap, you'll have to use the -st and the -pn options and stuff to get results. Out of scope for this starting point machine anyway, but I just thought I would mention that. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and as you're dealing with more complex pivoting and tunneling, you'll come across a lot of different tools. Okay, hopefully that made sense. We now have local access. We can now go and log into this database. We've got our instructions here as to how we can actually use PostgreSQL, so we can use this PSQL. So let's try and wrap this up. Let me clear this, we can see what's going on. I'm already inside proxy chains. We use that bash proxy chains -q bash, so I don't need to specify that here, and we'll do PSQL -h localhost, and -u is Christine. It asks us for the password, so grab that again. And here we go, we're connected. So hopefully you can see this in the background. I've just kind of got this transparent enough so that I can actually see what commands to run. And we can see here we can list, we can do \list. Here's a list of the different databases. We have Christine, Postgres, and secrets. So that sounds interesting. Let me take a copy of it. Let me go back to HackTheBox, and that's what it asks us for. What's the name of the database? I'm just assuming that it's probably secrets, which it is. And then, can you use dynamic? That's exactly what we just did. We just showed that we can use local -l. If we want to do reverse, by the way, that's -R. And you could also, as I say, TLDR, SSH, I think will give you some different examples here. Here's the SSH tunneling, dynamic, and here's local. You can go and get some good examples. Actually, the ChatGPT system is quite good for bringing up examples of this as well. I was using that for commands throughout my CPTS, and it did come in handy a couple of times. There was quite a few times where I went to Google something and didn't find anything within like 30 seconds. I was like, why am I typing this into Google? Yeah, worth checking out. So yes, we can. So we'll submit that, and let's go and grab the flag. So let me just bring up the commands again. So we can list tables. We can do \c and select the database. So this is kind of like the MySQL version of use. Instead of saying use secrets, we say \c secrets. We're now connected to secrets as the user Christine, and you can see here we can do \d to list the tables. \d. There's the flag table, so we could say select all from flag. Oh, do I need a select all from flag semicolon? Oh no, you can't do that. Okay. Well, there is another option which was, I'm pretty sure whenever I ran through this earlier, that's what I did, but okay, I must have done something different. We can also use \-dt to dump table, \dt flag. Okay, maybe it was select flag. I'm not really sure. Let me try the, is it capitalization? Select all from flag. Okay, capitalization. Let me try that with just a capital. Okay, that works as well. And that works. What did I do wrong? Select all from flag. Select all from flag. That looks identical to me. Okay, not sure what went wrong there. Somebody can let me know what I did wrong in the comments. And we'll submit that flag, and that's the box finished. So apparently, if I'm not mistaken, I saw HackTheBox saying that this is the 25th starting point machine that they have released, and I think they're not going to be doing any more. I don't know, is that just they're not gonna be doing one a month? Maybe they'll bring them back in future. I hope they do, because I think they're quite good at giving you quite a short introduction to different topics, and I think there's probably plenty of different additional topics that could help people in the learning process. But if not, I'll just get back to doing some more capture the flag videos probably. I'm going to do a video soon on using Obsidian for note taking when you're doing HackTheBox machines or pen testing generally. I'll also do a review of the CPTS certification as well shortly. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you have any questions or comments, as ever, leave them down below. Thanks.